Yeah. And so this will be Mountains of Madness. Mountains of Madness. That's like a perfect analogy of it. Um, so this is like a different approach to the storyboard. Because these are all things that I need to go on the storyboard somewhere. And so um, so you know, I don't even know where I was. I just turned on the camera. I thought I'd remember and I forgot. But there's so much to this in regards to the storyboard. Like, um, and so it's kind of like this is where stories come from. Stories do come from real life. Okay. So, like this thing that happened to me, you know, this is why they when they say life or art imitates life, like a story like Game of Thrones, or a story like They Live, or a story like Twin Peaks. Twin Peaks is a great and uh, reference point for this story that happened to me. And see, this is another thing where I'll lose people, because then people are like, well, you're referencing, stories that didn't happen, and you're talking about something that happened to you, you're claiming in real life. And it's like, okay, well, this is what I mean. Art imitates life. That's where they're getting these stories from. Like They Live, of course. I mean, if you understand the movie They Live, and you understand the phenomena and controversy and conspiracy surrounding the movie They Live, as far as like, why do all these truthers reference the movie They Live? If you're aware that truthers often reference the movie They Live, and then you have some understanding as to why truthers reference the movie They Live, well, then you're aware that a lot of those same people referencing the movie They Live refer to it as a documentary. It's not a story, it's not a movie, it's a documentary. So these kinds of stories are derived from real life things. That's where these people that put these stories together, they're from real life. And what they do is they already know nobody's going to believe the story. So even though, like, we'll just take They Live as an example, even though They Live is based on real life shit, they already know nobody's going to believe them if they say this is based on a true story. So they call it science fiction. And so they basically, what they do is they abandon the idea of trying to tell this story, this real life story. They just abandon it because they know it's hopeless. Nobody's going to listen to it or believe it. The only way they would ever get anyone to listen to it is if they just present it as a fictional story. Like, here's this fictional story, and They Live is such a great example, because if you watch the movie close enough and you're paying attention, that's how you come to the conclusion that this is based on real life. The Matrix is another one, dude. It's based in real life. So they're taking real life scenarios that are so indescribable and unbelievable that they know there's no way to present them to an audience under the the pretense that this is based in real life. So then they just call it, this is a science fiction. Even like The Thing. The Thing is about psychopathy and narcissism, like especially psychopathy. Because a psychopath, you can't tell who's who. Imagine if there was a virus that turned people into psychopaths that was being passed around, and some people were immune to the virus. And but you can't tell, because that's the same thing as a psychopath. You can't tell a psychopath from a normal person, because they're masters of disguise. And if you watch the movie The Thing, well, that's exactly what The Thing does. Is it? It's an alien that you know, etc. etc. And Twin Peaks. Twin Peaks is like a, a 12 disc series. So if you want to talk about having patience to listen to a long story, well, I mean, there's a lot of them. I mean, what? I mean, you got just the ones I have. I've got Deadwood. I've got X Files. That's a long ass thing. X Files. Boardwalk Empire. I've got Vikings. These are long ass epic stories. I've got the first season of Westworld, which apparently is the only one worth a fuck. But and and so then you might be assuming that because I'm referencing these fictional stories that I must be, you're starting to get suspicious and think I'm just making some story up, and I'm not. But and I don't the storyboard approach is I'm just telling you what happened. I'm just explaining what happened. And I don't plan. My plan is to be able to piece it all together from the storyboard, piece it all together, and be able to present it in. It's still a long story, so it would take maybe a couple hours. And once I piece it together, then I can kind of get versed in, okay, this is the best way to explain it, and the most efficient way to explain it and everything. But and I'll just present it as this is just something that happened to me, and it's not a fictional story. But like I've been in bands and stuff. I've practiced like the arts, and I mean just like music and stuff like this, and this is what like songs and stuff are. These kind of art forms are people telling true things, but they've just given up on the idea of trying to explain it to somebody. And so art, because art is one of the best ways to imitate life. It's like fuck doing commentary and trying to get anybody to listen. I'll just write a song about it, or whatever. Or all there's art forms. Art is like one of the most effective ways to tell a crazy story. If you understand that truth is stranger than fiction, and you present a strange story that's based on true events, well, nobody's going to believe you, and so they're less likely to even pay attention to the story. But if it's based on true events and it's a stranger than fiction story, if you present it as a fictional story, then people will be like, oh, I heard this there's this interesting story, some movie, and then people watch it, or whatever. It's like there's different mediums of relaying information, and art is one of them. The Matrix is a perfect example of using the art as a medium of relaying information to people. That's why The Matrix, just as the movie They Live, is another one where people are like, oh my God, dude, this is like, what the fuck, And this story is a bizarre, unbelievably strange story. And truth is stranger than fiction. So, anyways, I forgot why I turned the camera on and what I was going to go into, but this is one aspect of it. And just kind of going back to, talking about everything is, dude, like everything has gotten strange from 2016 up until now. And I don't know, I mean, I'm 50. So like a Zoomer, for example, would regard all this that's happened in the last 10 years as this is just the way life normally is. But that's from a Zoomer's perspective. From a Gen Xer's perspective, it's like, dude, shit has just started popping off like nobody's business starting in 2016 and 2017. Like, this is not normal. Like, what started in 2016 up until now is like we're rapidly moving into bizarro world. Like, the lines between what's real and what's not have exponentially, like, blurred exponentially in the last fucking 8 years or something. It's gotten like every year is like more and more bizarre, you know. Oh, okay, now I remember what I was gonna. Okay, so yes, now I remember. So there's so much to this. Like, when I've talked about my coverage of the illegal immigrants coming into Denver, and how just coincidentally, right after I was uploading all those videos, my life gets turned completely upside down, and that's all just part of the coincidence. And it's like, okay, I guess that's a coincidence. I am the only one that was posting feet on the ground, cell phone videos of in real time of fucking busloads of illegals coming in every morning. I haven't seen anyone else doing that ever. Have not seen it at all. And I use BitChute and YouTube platforms abnormally. I'm like not just an average user of one of these platforms. I'm a creator, so I'm always on them, observing and seeing what's going on. And I've never seen anybody post any videos of busloads of illegals, even though everybody's talking about it. I was the only one. And then my life just gets turned completely upside down and lit on fire, and immersed in fucking murder and death threats and all this, and fucking arson and everything all overnight. You know, that's just one thing. So I was gonna oh yeah, here's another thing. When we're talking about the jibby jabs, which I can't even talk about on YouTube without, I have to figure out how to speak in codes and all this stuff. I'm just gonna call it the jibbies. Or I guess I'll say the jibby jabs, because nobody's going to know what I mean if I say jibby. But, okay, so here's another thing. So, you know how the jibby jabs is all this big explosive rage all over online. Everybody's talking, oh, everybody's just dropping like flies, and all this hysteria about the jibby jabs. And so that's tied into this as well. And I'll try to go into it a little bit, or quickly anyways. So when all the lockdowns happened, I had to sit down with her, and I said, look, if they're going to mandate some jibby jabs, I'm fucking going completely off the grid. They ain't going to force no jib jab into me. And so I just want to make sure me and you are on the same page. I mean, I don't know what you think about all this, but I'm telling you what I think about it. And I want us to stay together. And I want you to come with me, but it's totally up to you. We really need to have this conversation. And then she agreed, yeah, it was very flat affect and all this stuff. And she's like, yeah, okay. So now fast forward to, you know, a couple months before the big event happened. What was that, 2 years later or whatever, a year and a half or something later. Okay, around that time, you know, they started doing the soft mandates of the jibby jib jabs. And so then when I had to sit her down again and say, look, man, it looks like they're already starting, they are starting the soft mandates already with pilots and essential workers. They're mandating these jibby jib jabs. And so we need to revisit this subject, because now that it's looking like it's going to happen. So are you still with me that if they mandate it, me and you are gone? We already got our exit plan. We're still going to do this, right? Now that it's actually literally happening in real life. And then that's when she's like, no, you know, she flip-flopped. And I'm like, what? And so then we had the discussion as to, what do you mean? So you're going to get it? And her explanation was is that she had to keep her job, so that because her job is, she was paying her child support with her job, but she was paying child support to the father of her children that hadn't even let her talk to her children for 2 years, and was totally like using her children to beat her over the head. But so the reason that she would get it is because to keep her job, so she could keep paying child support to a deadbeat dad who hadn't even let her talk to her own children for 2 years. Like, what? That doesn't even make any sense. And so, anyways, so I didn't even really realize this until about a year ago, is that one of the explanations as to how she completely flipped out and turned into a demon-possessed, satanic, fucking weird witch cult fucking psycho has to do with the jibby jib 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 jab. Because I've never really been into all this talk about all this. I never cared because I didn't get it. I didn't get COVID. I didn't get the jibby jib jab. And so, and I was just annoyed with all this talk about it. Like it completely took over all platforms. That's all BitChute ever talked about, 24/7 co-videodrome nonstop. And it's just, I was never into it. And all it did was, it just ruined my experience. I hated it. And so I never really cared too much about it. I didn't ever pay attention. But in the last year, I started paying a little bit closer attention. And then that's when it hit me. That's when it hit me like a ton of bricks that she got it. Because, people are talking about how it affects people differently. Some people supposedly just drop dead like flies or whatever. Well, other people, it makes them, allegedly they're going insane. And then there's all the talk about how it has that whole thing in it that it's like where it removes your soul, and there's all this advanced technology with it, and it's a weapon designed to basically like injecting a demon inside of you and stuff. So there's all this different talk. And then, the more I listened to it, then it just, one day out of the blue, it hit me. Like a year after, it's like, dude, I remember now. She had flip-flopped and decided that she would just get it if it was mandated, which I remember at the time shocked me. I couldn't believe, like, what the fuck? And then she just all of a sudden, out of the blue, several months later, just turns into this full retard, black-eyed, fucking demon-possessed witch from fucking hell that's like completely opposite person and like everything, like just totally, completely. And it's like, is that what happened? Did she get the jib jab? And so all of this stuff all ties in some way or other, and it's endless. It's nonstop, endless. Satanism, jib jabs, illegal immigration, mass psychosis, Satanism, demon possession, satanic human sacrifice, cover up by the law and the government of the murder, arson, death threats, all this shit. It just goes like major deep. So here's a question: was it the jibby jib? So, what about the illegal immigration? What's going on with all of this? So you see how the storyboard, it can just go on, and I have to rein it in somehow and piece all this together. And all these elements are important in the story, like making sure that the viewer is aware, like just something as simple as NPC sheeple, being surrounded by NPC sheeple, and how people like that respond to anything going on. Like, what are the sheeple aren't even paying attention to anything. They don't pay attention to the immigration. They don't pay attention to the co-videodrome. They don't pay attention to the nothing. All they care about is Pokemon, video games, anime, rainbow flavored cupcakes, unicorn farts, like, and we're talking about like 90% of the people on this planet that all they care about is Pokemon. Meanwhile, we're talking about immigration, Covidiodrome, jibby jibby jib jabs, genocide, World War III, zombie apocalypses, just like the level of insanity going on is like massive, and it has been for almost a decade now. And every year in the last decade, it's just increased and increased and increased and increased and increased and increased, and then boom, arson, death threats, satanic fucking cults, murder cover-ups, all this shit, all the boom. And I'll tell you what, I remember the last couple days sitting in Dallas a week after the fire happened, and I'm sitting at a bench, and it's like 1 o'clock in the morning, and I'm looking off into space, contemplating, and all I could see is the next thing that I am expecting happening is a nuclear bomb goes off somewhere in the world, like that this is what's coming next. And it was the fire. The fire, thinking about the fire was really just got me. I just started having this vision of a nuclear bomb, because everything that happens on the micro level is happening on the macro. So if this is what's happening to me on a micro level with arson, fire, murder, Satanism, boom, bam, all this insane stuff in 2 weeks, all this shit. If it's happening on a micro level, when you start thinking macro, and I'm starting to look at things on the macro, and like all I can see is a nuclear bomb going off, and then realizing, I think that's what we're heading into, and it's going to happen soon. I hope not. I don't even like hearing myself say this, but. And then, we got all the Israel is all happening going down there, so whatever.